Good afternoon. The time for convening has arrived. The Senate will come to order. At this time, I will ask all unauthorized personnel to exit the chamber. I recognize the distinguished gentleman from Coweta County, our Rules Chairman, for the reading of the journal.
Thank you, Mr. President, and happy Monday to everyone this fine February morning and afternoon. Want to congratulate and wish everyone a happy National Cheddar Day. Also want to wish everyone a National Crab Ragoon Day. National, this one's not good. I'm going to skip that one. And National Wingman's Day, and it's Self-Love Day. So
Say it again, Senator. I missed it.
Self-Love Day.
Self-Love Day.
So happy Self-Love Day to you there, Mr. President. Now, I want to introduce the lineup today for our pages. We have Arav Bamba. We have Caden Bond, Jordan Garner, and Tiffany Bigelow.
All right.
So welcome to our pages, and thank you for your service today.
All right. Give them a round of applause.
Mr. President, the journal has been read and found to be correct.
All right. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. And also, I'm going to take the senators from the 25th Thunder. We also have Butts County Day today, too. That's a place that's near and dear to my heart. So let's give our good folks from Butts County who are here today, y'all stand up, give them a round of applause here. All right. So you forgot to mention that, Senator from the 28th. How about that? So is there objection to dispensing with the reading of the journal? Chair hears none, and the reading of the journal is dispensed with. Is there objection to the confirmation of the journal? Chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. All senators who have bills and resolutions to introduce, please bring them to the Secretary's desk. First reading and references of Senate bills. Secretary.
Senate Bill 128 by Senator Albers of the 56th and others, a bill to be entitled an act, the Public Retirement Systems Investment Authority law so as to raise the limit for the total percentage of funds. Senate Bill 129 by Senator Williams of the 25th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to primaries and elections generally so as to provide for time off for employees to advance vote, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes.
Ethics.
Senate Bill 130 by Senator Payne of the 54th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend an act consolidating, amending, and codifying. Senate Bill 131 by Senator Tillery of the 19th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to permanent guardianship so as to provide for service by
children
publication.
and family.
Senate Bill 132 by Senator Beach of the 21st and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to general provisions relative to agriculture so as to prohibit the acquisition of possessory interest in certain land by certain non-resident aliens, to provide for definitions, to provide for exemptions. Senate Bill 133 by Senator Strickland of the 17th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to the juvenile code so as to create a uniform process
Children
to assume.
and family.
Senate Bill 134 by Senator Kautzert of the 46th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to evidence so as to provide that a child witness be deemed
Children
competent.
and family.
Senate Bill 135 by Senator Kirkpatrick of the 32nd and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to determination of paternity so as to align evidentiary, medical, and genetic testing with the
Children and
uniform.
family.
Senate Bill 136 by Senator Dugan of the 30th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to calculation of development impact fees so as to modify the required revenue source for a development project.
Economic development.
Senate Bill 137 by Senator Burns of the 23rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to definitions regarding tuition equalization grants at private colleges and universities so as to revise.
Higher education.
Senate Bill 138 by Senator Williams of the 25th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to how vacancies filled, failure to appoint, and certification required in public official investigation by special commission upon
Public safety.
indictment. Senate Bill 139 by Senator C. of the 34th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to employment and training of peace officers so as to provide for the establishment
Public
of a
safety.
statewide. Senate Bill 140 by Senator Sumners of the 13th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to regulation of hospitals and related institutions so as to prohibit certain
Health
surgical.
and Human Services.
Senate Bill 141 by Senator Dixon of the 45th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to general provisions relative to professions and businesses so as to prohibit healthcare providers from performing specified practices on minors relating
Health
to
and Human
altering.
Services.
Senate Bill 142 by Senator Anderson of the 24th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to responsible dog ownership so as to
Insurance
revise.
and labor.
Senate Bill 143 by Senator Strickland of the 17th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to judges of the Supreme Court, judges of the Court of Appeals.
Retirement.
Senate Bill 144 by Senator Islam of the 7th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to adjutant general duties, records, seal, and effect on documentary evidence so as to remove the
Veterans.
requirement. Senate Bill 145 by Senator Still of the 48th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to general provisions applicable to counties and municipal corporations so as to prohibit local regulations that create differing standards.
Slogo General.
Senate Bill 146 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to jurisdiction of and powers and duties of the
Regulated
Georgia Public.
Industries.
Senate Bill 147 by Senator Still of the 48th and others, a bill to be entitled an act, the Quality Basic Education Act, so as to permit student transfers from local school systems.
Education and Youth.
Senate Bill 148 by Senator Kennedy of the 18th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to nonprofit corporations so as to comprehensively revise, simplify, and modernize said chapter.
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 149 by Senator Albers of the 56th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to sales under the Commercial Code so as to enact the Georgia Door-to-Door Sales Act, to provide for a short title, to provide for
Regulated
definition.
Industries.
Senate Bill 150 by Senator Halpern of the 39th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to health of students in elementary and secondary education and general provisions regarding health respectively so as to
Regulated
require.
Industries.
Senate Resolution 123 by Senator Burns of the 23rd and others, a resolution urging the Attorney
Rules.
General. Senate Resolution 124 by Senator Jackson of the 41st and others, a resolution
Rules.
commending. That completes the order, Mr. President.
First reading references to House bills.
House Bill 93 by Representative Campbell of the 171st, a bill to be entitled an act providing for a Board of Commissioners of Mitchell
Slogan.
County. House Bill 119 by Representative Corbett of the 174th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to general
Public
provisions.
safety.
House Bill 120 by Representative Corbett of the 174th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to limited driving permits for certain
Public
offenders.
safety.
House Bill 134 by Representative Carpenter of the 4th and Tarvin of the 2nd, a bill to be entitled an act consolidating,
State
amending,
and
and
local
codifying. House Bill 160 by Representative Green of the 154th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to provide for the creation of one or more community
State
improvement
and local
districts.
government.
House Bill 175 by Representative Daniel of the 117th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to safe operation of motor carriers,
Public
commercial
safety.
motor. House Bill 183 by Representative Barton of the 5th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to vehicles with false or secret compartments and registration and licensing.
Transportation.
House Bill 199 by Representative LaHood of the 175th, a bill
State
to
and
be
local
entitled an
government.
act. House Bill 210 by Representative Smith of the 138th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to authorize the governing
State and local
authority.
government.
House Bill 240 by Representative Green of the 154th, a bill to be entitled an act to authorize the assessment and collection of
State
a
and local
technology fee.
government.
House Bill 255 by Representative Corbett of the 174th, a bill to amend an act
State and local
providing for.
government.
That completes the order, Mr. President.
It is now time for the afternoon. Oh, I'm sorry. It's time for second readings. I apologize. I was getting a little ahead of myself. Committee reports to standing committee.
The Senate Committee on Children and Families has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Resolution 76 do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Kirkpatrick of the 37th District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 59 do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Strickland of the 17th District Chairman. Mr. President, that completes the order. And second readers.
Secretary will read bills and resolutions for the second time.
Senate Bill 27 by Senator Brass of the 28th and others, unfair trade practices. Healthcare insurer from requiring an ophthalmologist or optometrist to extend any discounts on services that are not covered under eye care services prohibit. Senate Bill 41 by Senator Williams of the 25th and others, watercraft. Completion of a boater education course for registration of watercraft require. Senate Bill 42 by Senator Hodges of the 3rd and others, human trafficking hotline information model notice requirements. Increase the fine for failure to comply. Senate Bill 43 by Senator Jackson of the 41st and others, Georgia State Indemnification Fund, death by suicide of a public safety officer in certain instances be considered a death in the line of duty provide. Senate Bill 56 by Senator Huffstedler of the 52nd and others, ad valorem taxation, State Revenue Commissioner to contract with the Board of the Employees Retirement System of Georgia, offer certain county tax commissioners the option to participate in a state-administered deferred compensation plan require. Senate Bill 61 by Senator Strickland of the 17th and others, sick leave for care of immediate family members sunset provision relating to such sick leave requirements repeal. Senate Bill 65 by Senator Watson of the 1st and others, Commissioner of Insurance, General Provisions, establishing an advisory committee provisions authorize. Senate Bill 68 by Senator Williams of the 25th and others, racketeering influence and corrupt organizations. Offensive dogfighting as a racketeering activity includes Senate Bill 84 by Senator Huffstedler of the 52nd and others, Georgia Uniform Securities Act of 2008, financial protections for elder and disabled adults who may be victims of financial exploitation provide. Senate Bill 90 by Senator Dixon of the 45th and others, selling and other trade practices, commercial financing disclosures provide. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. It is now time for the afternoon roll call. Are there any motions to excuse Senator from the 33rd? You wish to ask for excuse?
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, y'all. I ask, sir, for unanimous consent to excuse the following senators for business inside the Capitol: 5, 38, 55, and 42. And no, sir, those are not your college football signals.
Are these the Eagles fans from last night? Without objection, the senators from the 5th, the 38th, the 55th, and the 42nd will be excused. Any other unanimous consents? Chair hearing none. As Secretary, we will unlock the machines, and without objection, Secretary will unlock the machine. All right. Looks like we got most everybody here today, so that's good. I appreciate everybody working hard this morning on budgetary items and committee assignments and things of that nature, so we greatly appreciate that. Before we have our devotion of the day, our pastor of the day, I wanted to take an opportunity and introduce a couple of special guests, but right now I've got a former colleague of ours from Pooler, Georgia. Pooler, the big town of Pooler, Georgia, which is, quite frankly, becoming a fairly large town. It wasn't a large town when you were serving in the Senate, but it is, it's growing. But it's an honor to have Congressman Buddy Carter here with us today. Congressman Carter is a longtime friend. Like I said, he served in this body for many years and served in the General Assembly before that, but he's been doing an outstanding job for us up in Washington, D.C., and he's got the scars to prove it, too, I believe, don't you, Congressman? But let's give Congressman Carter a round of applause and appreciate his work.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Thank y'all. Thank y'all very much. I never got a standing ovation when I was state senator, I'll tell you that. Thank y'all very much for giving me just a couple of seconds to tell you how much we appreciate everything that you're doing up here. You know, I have the honor and privilege of representing the 1st Congressional District of Georgia. There are 14 districts in the state of Georgia, 435 in this country, and I get to represent the very best one, and I mean that sincerely. I represent the entire coast of Georgia, a coast that includes 2 major seaports, the Port of Savannah, the Port of Brunswick. Port of Savannah, the number 3 container port in the country, the Port of Brunswick, the number 2 roll-on, roll-off port in the country. We also have a strong ag presence, a strong forestry presence, as well as a strong military presence. So we are very, very blessed. I just wanted to take the time to thank all of you here for your investment in the infrastructure in our district, particularly at the Georgia ports, where we continue to be the economic engine of this state and of the entire Southeast. It is truly an honor to represent the Georgia ports and the fine work that they're doing. I also want to thank you for your investment in the infrastructure to do with the Hyundai plant. That is extremely important as we grow in the 1st Congressional District and in that area, the largest economic development project in the history of our state, right here in the 1st Congressional District. We thank you for your commitment and for your continuing to support the infrastructure needs in our district. You know, one of the things you recognize and realize whenever you get to Washington, D.C. is just how well the Georgia State Legislature runs, and it does. This is a great example of government at work and good government at work. Thank you each for all of you do. Thank you for your part in that. God bless you, and God bless our state and our country.
I wanted to give the senator here an opportunity. He's got some very special guests here today. He's got a new addition to the family. And so he said, I want to take a point of personal privilege. I said, no, you got a new grandbaby. That you come up to the roster now. So why don't you introduce your grandchildren here?
Thank you. Actually, it's a special day for my grandson who was born March 1st last year. My only grandchild so far anyway. My mom's 92. I was one of 9. I bragged on it to her and she said, what took you so long? I've got 35 great grandchildren. You're way behind. So I don't have a lot of control over that, but it's great to have him here. And his mom's a demon deacon from Wake Forest, and his dad went to Georgia Tech, but my younger daughter and I went to UGA, and we're working real hard on making the first words he says be "Go Dogs." Now also it happens to be my wife's birthday today, so it's nice to have her in town. You guys know how hard I am to get along with. You can imagine what she's got to put up with all these decades, but it's great to have them. Easy back. Anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to have him here and look forward to having him in the Cobb County area. Maybe they'll stay there a long time and make great contributions to Georgia. Thank you.
All right, good job, good deal. It is my honor to introduce the pastor of the day today, Mr. Charles Gardner. He has reminded me when I stepped in that I am his 4th lieutenant governor that he's actually pastored, been the pastor today for, and you don't look that old, So, but it is an honor to have Mr. Charles here today. He is a pastor of Redwood Church here in Atlanta. He's a graduate of Georgia Tech and also a graduate of the Candler School of Theology of Emory University. He and his wife, Shannon, have one child. She's an employee of Chick-fil-A, Chick-fil-A organization, obviously, which is a great organization. And it's such an honor to have Charles here today. But before he comes to the podium, let's all join us in pledge allegiance of the flag and the Georgia state flag as well. So, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag and to the principles for which it stands, wisdom, justice, moderation, courage. As stated before, it's a pleasure to have Charles Gardner here today, and appreciate all the times he's come down here and shared the message with us, and I know they are very appreciative of him pastoring the Redwood Church here and in the Metro Atlanta area. So I will now yield the floor to Charles, and it's great to have him here today as our pastor of the day.
Yeah, I thought about that when I reminded Lieutenant Governor that he was my fourth. I don't think of myself as getting old, so I hope I'm not, but it is. I always get butterflies, y'all. It's such a privilege to come down here. So good afternoon, Lieutenant Governor, Mr. Secretary, senators, guests. It was such a surprise and a pleasant surprise to see Congressman Carter here. He, when I was serving downtown, he had a place there, and when he was up in Atlanta for session, he would often worship with us, and so grateful to see him. And he hosted our family in Washington several years ago, when I think my son got the bug for politics. And so we're grateful to my new senator, Senator Estevez, and I'm glad to have you here for the first time to be able to be here with you. I'm grateful to Senator Duggan for getting me a Georgia Tech cookie off one of your desks. I appreciate that. Didn't realize it was Georgia Tech Day down here. I saw our new AD and our new head coach, and so that was good to see those faces here this afternoon. So I guess most of you were like me, that you were watching the big game last night. It was some of us were watching for the football, some were watching for the ads, and some were just need something to do in between bites of hot wings and pizza. But the most exciting thing for me last night was that our own native son, born in Decatur, Georgia, kicked for Westminster and kicked for the Yellow Jackets, delivered that game-winning kick. So Harrison Butker won his second Super Bowl, and one of the special moments for my family and me was we had an opportunity to be on the sidelines for a game once, and they took notes of my son talking, and he at that point thought he might want to be a kicker. And so we have a handwritten note from Harrison Butker telling him to follow his dreams. And so it's a special thing for Zach to have as he saw him kick that field goal last night. But I was watching the game last night. I was thinking a few weeks ago, it was a Saturday morning, I was trying to turn on the TV and have something on the background while I was doing some chores around the house, and I was flipping around, and there was a show called the NFL's Most Interesting Jobs, and it was hosted by Stephen Smith Sr., who was a receiver in the league for 16 years. He caught for the Carolina Panthers and for the Baltimore Ravens, and it was a fun show, and he did two things that you just don't often think about in the NFL. One was that in the NFL, there is a person on the sideline who has a big K on their chest, and their entire job, the kickers, the punters, the place kickers, the kickoff specialists, they select footballs. And, not going to go back to Deflategate or anything like that, but these kickers want a football that feels right to them when they're kicking. And so their entire job, this whole game, is to shuttle these footballs in and out of the game. And so this guy did that for a game, and it's one of those things you'd think would be easy, just throwing a football to an official, getting it out there, but it was really difficult. And the other thing he did was that he went to the Minnesota Vikings and spent a day in there with their head chef and nutritionist. You think about all that goes into professional football, college football, all of these levels of sports. And at the professional level during training camp, they had all of these bottles lined up, and they were the shaker bottles for those who drink protein shakes. And every single player had their own individual bottle and their own individual recipe that was tailored for their specific body type and what they needed, if they were injured, or what was all going on. And so I was watching that and thinking about, you watch the Super Bowl. There's 11 guys on each side of the ball on any given down. I forget what an NFL roster is now, 40, 50 players at the most. But think about all the people behind the scenes, everything that's going on behind the scenes, the number of people that are required to keep those players healthy, to keep them coached up, to do all the things that gets them to that moment. I'm thinking about that stadium and the grounds crew and all those who take care of all that's going on, the production crew, the miles of wiring that is run to all the various cameras that are going on in the stadium. And it reminded me of one of my favorite scriptures, and it's from Paul's letter to the church in Corinth. And, You know, these churches just couldn't figure it out early on, and we ain't gotten much better in the prevailing, couple thousand years. We're still trying to figure it out. But the churches were in disagreement, and they were disagreeing about who was better. Everybody thought that their purpose, their gift was the most important. And so Paul writes to the church in Corinth, and he says this, "Indeed, the body does not consist of one member, but many. If the foot would say, 'Because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body,' that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear would say, 'Because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body,' that would not make it any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would be the hearing? If the whole body were hearing, where would be the sense of smell? But as it is, God arranged the members of the body, each one of them as he chose. If all were a single member, where would the body be? As it is, there are many members, yet one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, 'I have no need of you,' nor again to the head, to the feet, 'I have no need of you.' To the contrary, the members of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And those members of the body that we think less honorable, we clothe with greater honor. And our less respectable members are treated with greater respect, whereas our more respectable members do not need this. But God has arranged the body, given the greater honor to the inferior member, so that there may be no dissension within the body, but the members may have the same care for one another. If one suffers, all suffer together. And if one is honored, all rejoice together." Since the beginning of the year in our church, we've been in a sermon series about purpose. I got an email on December 31st from a local running shoe company that said, "Don't make a promise, make a plan." And as a preacher, I read that and I thought, I'm not sure about that. I thought about it. I thought I shouldn't make a promise without a plan. And then what I realized is that I can't make a plan if I don't know what my purpose is. I have to understand what my purpose is, and I have to also understand that my purpose needs to be something greater than myself, that my individual purpose needs to be a part of a larger overall purpose. Having purpose bigger than ourselves, it means that when we're doing tasks that others might overlook or think menial or unimportant, we understand that that task is our purpose in that moment that contributes to the greater purpose. Last week, Shannon and I were out in San Diego for Chick-fil-A's annual meeting, and it's always a series of incredible speakers and a time of great inspiration. I heard a story that I'd never heard before, and I suspect many of you have heard it. When I did some research on it, many people consider the story to be apocryphal, but a preacher never lets the truth get in the way of a good story, so here it goes. It's said that after President Kennedy made that bold encouragement to the country, that bold challenge to NASA to put a person on the moon, that he visited NASA, and he was taking a tour of NASA to see how progress was being made toward that goal of placing human beings on the moon and returning them safely to the earth. As they were walking along, the president noticed a gentleman out of the corner of his eye who was walking down the hall, and this gentleman seemed so happy and so full of joy, and he was carrying a broom, and the president paused the tour for a moment, and he walked over and he said, "Sir, what is it that you do here at NASA?" The gentleman stood up, put his shoulders back, held his broom in his hand, and he pointed toward the sky, and he said, "Mr. President, I'm going to put a man on the moon." So I think about how important it is that no matter what we're doing, no matter what we're called to in life, no matter what gifts we have, that we use those gifts to contribute to the greater good. There's a man at NASA who believes that by keeping the floors clean, that he's contributing to one of the greatest accomplishments that humans have ever known. Each of our accomplishments are also that important. Will you pray with me? Almighty God, may we have the humility to use the gifts that you've given us, not for our sake, but for yours and for the sake of our brothers and sisters. God, we pray today for all those anywhere in this world who are hurting. We pray particularly for the people of Turkey and that region that have been so devastated. May we find ways to reach out, to lend a helping hand, to be in service to them as they recover and as they mourn. And God, throughout this great state of Georgia, may each of us find ways to make a difference so that we can continue to be the greatest state and the greatest country the world has ever known. Bless us this day and throughout the rest of this week, for I offer myself in the name of Christ my Lord. Amen. Thank you.
We have some special guests here today, and we got our good friends, all our good Georgia Tech grads are coming up on the stage today. So it's been kind of quiet today. Well, y'all got to do a better job of letting everybody know y'all are here today. Here, yeah. I mean, y'all are called the Rambling Wreck for a reason, I think. So, Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Resolution 79 by Senators Anna Vitarte of the 31st, Rahman of the 5th, Burns of the 23rd, and others. A resolution recognizing and commending Brent Key as the 21st head football coach and Jay Batt as the 10th director of athletics at the Georgia Institute of Technology and for other purposes. Whereas a Georgia Tech alumnus and football letter winner, Coach Brent Key was named the 21st head coach in Georgia Tech football history. And whereas Jay Batt was named the director of athletics at Georgia Tech starting October 24th, 2022, and in this position, he is responsible for planning, developing, administering, and advancing Georgia Tech's intercollegiate athletic programs. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body commend Brent Key and Jay Batt for their many years of dedicated service, congratulate them upon their new appointments, and extend to them our sincere best wishes for continued success, health, and happiness. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. I am glad to call on our good senator from the 31st District. We're also joined by Senator from the floor leader here, Senator from the 50th, yes, and then the senator from the 23rd as well is here. So always good to have our friends at Georgia Tech here with us today, and Georgia Tech athletics, and it's a pleasure here. And Senator from the 9th, you've got a son that plays for the Tech. Why are you not up here? So come on up here, Senator. So, but I call on the senator from the 31st to speak to the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll just continue on by saying that there is a new day at Georgia Tech, and we are proud of these leaders that are with us here today. Let's give them a round of applause. Our new athletic director, Jay Bott, started in October 2022, and I will tell you that it's also awesome to have a Tech alum leading the Rambling Wreck going forward, and Coach Brent Key, and we look forward to big things happening to them, with them, and our alumni base, and taking the state back from you Georgia Bulldogs who are out there. So, oh, you can bring it. I hear it. You know, y'all had your back-to-back national titles. You guys don't get offended. But the rebuilding that you are seeing today, it's serious. It's intentional. And I do want to give praise to President Cabrera and his leadership, the leadership at Georgia Tech, the alumni, the work our foundation does, but also all of the dedicated Yellow Jackets in Georgia and across the country who really look forward to this day, such as me, for our future generations, and the strength of Georgia Tech will always be strong. So, Mr. Athletic Director, Coach Key, thank you for being in the Senate. Go Jackets.
Senator from 33rd, do you wish to rise?
Sir, yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senators from the 28th and the 10th.
Without objection, the senator from the 28th? 28th and the 10th. I believe the 28th is sitting right there in front of you, Senator.
Brass?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay.
The 10th, okay. Senator from the 12th. Without objection, senator from the
Sorry,
10th to be
Brass.
excused. So it is now time for appoints of personal privilege. Any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? No. Do that. Before we do our points of personal privilege, we have our doctor of the day, and I'd like to call on the senator from the 39th to introduce the doctor of the day.
Good afternoon. It gives me great privilege and honor to be able to introduce you to today's Doctor of the Day, Dr. Shelby Wilkes. Dr. Wilkes is a vitreoretinal surgeon who specializes in treating diseases and surgery of the retina and vitreous, including diabetic retinopathy. He has published numerous articles in scientific ophthalmology journals, and he was the principal investigator of the first statewide diabetic retinopathy screening study ever performed in the United States, which happened right here in Georgia. In addition, he's a member of the exclusive American Society of Retina Specialists. He has given numerous presentations locally, nationally, and internationally on retinal diseases, including surgery, in places as diverse as Paris, France, and Montreal, Canada. He is very highly educated, graduated in just 3 years from Alcorn State University with a degree in biology, summa cum laude, and he received his MD degree from the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine in Baltimore, Maryland. And he received his MBA degree from the Coles College of Business, Kennesaw State University. He has been inducted into the Beta Gamma Sigma Honor Society, and Dr. Wilkes is a member of the Phi Kappa Phi Honor Society in Business, and he's been listed in the Marquee of Who's Who in Finance and Industry. He is a board member of the Georgia State Medical Association and the Treasurer, Chief Finance Officer of the National Medical Association. We are in great hands today with our Doctor of the Day, Dr. Shelby Wilkes.
Thank you for that gracious introduction, Senator Hampton, Mr. President, Mr. Secretary, honorable members of the Georgia Senate, the Dean. I'm happy to have this opportunity just to share a few words with you about being the doctor of the day. It's a privilege, I think, to be asked to serve. We are about service. We're about taking care of the citizens of Georgia, all of our citizens. I appreciate your dedication to moving Georgia forward economically and the attempt to always reach out across the aisle. I see many of you seem like you're just good friends. I won't say any more about that, but what I'm really concerned about is that we must continue to lead Georgia forward in health care. We have great institutions here in the state of Georgia. They're doing a fine job of dealing with new technology, and I'm just happy that Georgia is a place that makes it possible for someone like me who has narrowed down his specialty and training to that portion of the eye that allows us to see when other parts of the eye can be reversed. But again, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to come before you today, and I'm enjoying meeting some of you briefly as I meet you in the Health Legislative Medical Office. Thank you so much.
Senator from the 6th, do you wish to rise on a point of personal privilege?
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I stand here for the first time from the well, humbled by the opportunity to be here with each and every one of you every day, and honored to represent the residents of the 6th Senate District of Georgia. I wanted to be sure to make my first time here up in the well special, so I spent some time thinking about what I wanted to talk about. And while I was nervous about coming up here in the first place, believe it or not, my friend, the senator from the 9th, reminded me that it's like getting up here and talking to family. So, colleagues, I'm going to talk to you like family and tell you something a little bit personal, something that's very personal to me. I want to talk to you about a woman who is the driving force behind who I am today. She is the main reason that I am here today. And that woman is my mom, Linda, the person that taught me at an early age the need to leave one's community better than you found it, and to treat others the way you'd like to be treated. And it is these basic tenets upon which I serve. Now, one thing about my mom is that about 6 years ago, at the age of 62, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And the reality is that because of inadequate health care, which is a conversation for another day, she was likely diagnosed a couple years too late. For the last 5 years, I have been her primary caregiver. And today, as we navigate the late stages of the disease, I want to sound the alarm in this chamber. We are not ready. We are not ready. Our senior care system is not ready. And our senior safety net is not ready for the wave of boomers that will, and yes, I said boomers, that will be impacted by Alzheimer's and dementia. As I've worked to navigate the senior care system over the last several years, I've often asked myself, and sometimes I've asked others, what would happen to my mom if she did not have a son with resources, who was an attorney, married to a nurse practitioner? No one's really given me a clear answer on that. There are a few things that are clear, though. We have work to do. First, we have to support education efforts of our families, medical practitioners, and policymakers, because too many people are unaware of the complexities of this issue until it impacts one of their loved ones. And by then, it's too late. Second, we have to strengthen, not weaken, the quality of care for our seniors at home or in assisted living and nursing homes. I've seen how staffing, a failure to adhere to best practices, and a lack of accountability can lead to real pain for patients and their families. There's also need to develop the workforce in order to meet the demand for the next 5 years. We'll need to increase the senior care workforce by 45%, which is a huge overtaking. Third, we have to improve the access and cost of services for our seniors. Many don't realize how expensive care is for Alzheimer's patients and dementia patients. My mom, who has been middle to low income for most of her life, had a relatively small nest egg. And while living in an assisted living facility, I had to personally supplement her income up to $2,000 a month in some cases to ensure that she received the care that she needed. The average cost of care can range anywhere between $4,000 to $12,000 a month for patients who are in mid to late stages of the disease. There also aren't enough beds in these facilities. The higher quality facilities have a massive wait list, and access to any of these facilities is similar to what we're seeing in the mental health space. Fourth, we have to treat caregiving like the job that it is, and understand that it is traumatic. While I am blessed that I can pay others to take care of my mom, for many in Georgia, they are taking time off from their jobs, or in some cases, quitting their jobs altogether. And it is terribly difficult to care for someone with Alzheimer's. And I can tell you that I've had to do things for my mom that she would never have wanted me to do, whether it's giving her a bath or cleaning her up after an accident or rushing to the hospital after a fall. This work is taxing. And it's also taxing on our economy. Over $9 billion worth of unpaid care has been provided by caregivers in 2021, and that number has gone up in 2022. Nearly 14% of caregivers are in poor physical health themselves, and 22% have depression. The very day I was sworn in, colleagues, while many of us went home or to a party to watch the Bulldogs thrash TCU, I watched the game from the hospital because my mom had fallen the week before and was still recovering. And the nurse that night told me something that I've heard 100 times over the last few years while caring for my mom. You're such a good son. And my response is always the same. It's the least that I can do. Which leads me to the answer to the question that I mentioned that I kept posing to myself. What would happen to my mom if she didn't receive the care that she was receiving from me? And the sad reality is that she would have died. She would have died a long time ago in some hospital or because of a lack of care somewhere else. And unfortunately for seniors across this state, that is exactly what is happening, and it's going to get much worse as boomers grow older. It will be a crisis. It is a crisis. Our seniors, our parents deserve better. So colleagues, because they deserve better, I look forward to working with you over the coming months to make sure that we deliver for them, because that's exactly what good daughters and good sons would do. Many of you are wondering why you have cake on your desk. It's because my mom loved to bake. She would bake for everyone. That's how she showed them that she cared. So I wanted to leave you with a token of my appreciation for you from Sweet Julabelle Bakery in Decatur. I've also left you with some information from the Alzheimer's Association of Georgia that has information detailing the current state of the disease in this state. I look forward to working with all of you. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate those words, and I too, living with that myself, I have a mother that has early stages of Alzheimer's, and had a grandmother and an aunt that succumbed to that disease, and it is it's not fun to watch. And I appreciate your words today, Senator. Senator from the 19th, you wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? Actually, you stepped away. Senator from the 16th, you wish to rise on a point of personal privilege?
Good morning or good afternoon. We have to change it from where we are. On your desk, you will find the Senate Aviation Caucus. If you have interest in that, if you'll fill that out and send that or put that on my desk, I would love to have that with you and talk to you on that as we put that together if you have an interest in aviation and what it does for our communities. I want to talk this morning. We're going to be talking in the next few weeks. We're going to be talking about horse racing and sports gambling. And I'm in the insurance business, and I do horse farms. I insure horses, and it's to my benefit, probably for my business. But I'm not really for that. I don't believe that gambling is the best way to raise funds and do things. So I make myself plain as far as that. It's interesting that it was said that by George Washington that the Bible is a start. It's a guide for us, and it's a passage in Luke. It says, "But don't begin to count the cost before you build." And I think for us, anything we do, we need to count the cost of what we do when we pass it. I want to tell you a story about my friend. His name is John. John spent $20,000 to buy a horse for his daughter. And he came to me, and he was excited about that, and his daughter was excited about that. And we were talking about it. He had never owned a horse before. never had any part of that. And he said, I'm excited. My daughter's excited. I said, let me ask a question. And I knew a little bit about John. I said, but let me talk to you. I said, have you thought about the feed and hay that you're going to have to feed that horse? I said, now, horse is a 24-hour, 7 days a week, 365-day feed process. And he looked at me and said, shook his head. I said, do you have a barn or do you have a place you're going to board the horse? And he thought a little bit more. I said, you're going to have some new friends. Those new friends you're going to pay money to on a regular basis. You're going to have a veterinarian that's going to come visit you on a regular basis, and he's going to send you a bill. He's going to like you. You're going to have a farrier that's going to be in there every 4 to 6 weeks, and he's going to send you a bill. You're going to have to hire a trainer, or your daughter's going to want to hire a trainer. And I said, she's going to learn how to ride. Next, you're going to want a horse trailer. He says, what for? I said, because your daughters want to go to that horse show, and you're going to have to do that, and you're going to have to buy that horse trailer. And I said, by the way, you'll also need a truck. That was the only thing he was happy about. I said, and then there's the entry fees at the show, hotel stays for the show, and then lastly, you've got to insure the horse with me. He looked at me and he said, wow, the price is not just the price of the horse. The price is what it costs to keep him. And here's what I would say as we enter into and discuss and debate the issues of horse racing and sports gambling, we need to consider the cost of addiction, sex trafficking, even our young people being targeted by the online gambling. Suicide, 1/3 of addicted gamblers attempt to commit suicide. Loss of savings and income for families. And just the social cost for addiction that we have to treat because we provided that opportunity for them to participate. Georgia's the #1 state to do business, and I believe it's the #1 state, period. I believe it's a great place to live. It's a great place to raise a family. And when you're #1, you don't have to compromise any other way. We're giving money back to our citizens. We're returning money to the citizens because we have a surplus. And I just don't know that I believe that the best use of our resources is to bring in gambling into our state. I think we need to count the cost because the price can be extremely high to those around us and our families and to the citizens of Georgia. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Does anyone else wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? All right. Any motions to withdraw or commit? Chair hearing none. Senator from the 33rd. We're gonna put a permanent beeper on you, man.
Thank you, Mr. President, my fellow senators, colleagues, friends, and y'all. I just want to say on behalf of co-chairs Senator Brandon Beach and myself that we are cordially inviting you to join the Senate American-Korean Friendship Caucus. Our mission is to continue to promote American and Korean cultural and economic friendship while always remembering the historic relationship and the roles between both of our nation's militaries and veterans. Mr. Suni Park will serve as the caucus ambassador. Suni Park founded the Korean War Veteran Memorial Board and raised money and built the Korean War Memorial honoring Georgia veterans that is erected in front of the Sleepy Floyd building. This caucus is near and dear to me because my father served combat in the Army in Korea. He was one of those, the troops who came in when MacArthur went to Incheon, and he also has a Purple Heart. And I thank you for your time, Mr. President. I yield the well.
We do have a consent calendar, privilege resolutions. Secretary, read the caption. You do have before you a consent calendar of privilege resolutions. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution on the consent calendar? Chair hears none, and the resolution of the consent calendar is adopted. Are there any motions to withdraw or commit? Chair hears none. We are moving on to the rules calendar. Secretary will read SB 44.
Senate Bill 44 by Senator Hatchett of the 50th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 16 of the OCGA relating to crimes and offenses so as to provide for mandatory minimum penalties for violations of the Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act, to provide for related matters. The Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Strickland of the 17th Chairman. Senate Judiciary offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 44, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 16 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated, relating to crimes and offenses so as to provide for mandatory minimum penalties for violations of the Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act, to provide for an exception for imposing such mandatory penalties in certain circumstances, to amend Code Section 571 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated, relating to orders, decisions, or judgments appealable and defendants' rights to cross-appeal so as to provide for the state's right to appeal the court's deviation from mandatory minimum sentencing regarding certain offenses. Senator McLaurin of the 14th offers the following amendment, Amendment 1, to amend Senate Committee Substitute Senate Bill 44 by inserting after line 89 the following: no person shall be prosecuted for an offense in this code section if that person is under the age of 18 and is suspected or confirmed by a victim service organization using the process described in Code Section 1511.130.1 as a victim of sexual exploitation or trafficking pursuant to Code Section 16.546. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Recognize the senator from the 50th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, I bring before you Senate Bill 44 on behalf of the governor. Governor Kemp has made tackling criminal street gangs a priority since the beginning of his administration. Through listening to local law enforcement and prosecutors, and with the help from the legislature, the governor has championed one of the strongest criminal street gang statutes in the country, created the Gang Task Force at the GBI, and added the Gang Prosecution Unit to the Attorney General's office. Building on his promises, the governor, in partnering with the Attorney General and the Lieutenant Governor, seeks to continue to crack down on criminal street gangs by giving prosecutors the tools to go after known gang members and protect the children of this state. Part 1 of this bill seeks to add a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years for those in violation of the criminal street gang statute in order to crack down on individuals that perpetuate these crimes. The bill provides district attorneys, the Attorney General, and judges with tools that will help infiltrate these criminal organizations and bring more gang members to justice. Part 2 of this bill adds enhanced penalties on gang members that recruit children into their criminal enterprise. The governor's office has been informed of the rising occurrence of gang members targeting children for criminal street gang recruitment. This past November, the governor and the Attorney General announced an indictment of 17 alleged gang members in which, among other crimes, gang members were recruiting young children by using family-friendly events. While all efforts to combat criminal street gang activities have had a tremendous impact throughout the state of Georgia, more must be done to keep our children away from a life of crime and keep our community safe. Through this bill, the governor's office wants to send a strong message to gang members. If you come after our children and endanger our communities, we are coming after you. Members of this Senate, there is no place for gangs in Georgia, and passage of this vital legislation is a top priority. Enhancing gang sentencing across the board will ensure, through prison sentences for more gang offenders, while offering a strong incentive for those accused of gang activity to cooperate with prosecutors. Mr. President, I'm happy to yield to any questions.
You do have questions, Senator. Senator from the 14th, do you wish to rise?
Mr. President, not for a question, just wanted to indicate willingness to speak, Mr.
Okay,
President.
sorry about that. Senator from the 22nd, you want to speak in the well? Okay. You wish to ask a question, Senator?
I do, and to speak from the well, Mr. President. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
On line 83, and let me preface this by saying I'm not a lawyer by trade, but on line 83 it says the defendant has no prior felony conviction, and starting off at line 78 all the way through 89 with the and on line 83, doesn't that mean that everything from 78 all the way to 89 is inclusive, so that a judge must meet the criteria of all of those things for a judge to entertain this relief from the mandatory minimum sentence?
Sorry, you're saying to start at 75 and going down to which line?
75 all the way down to 89.
Yeah, the judge may depart from the mandatory minimum sentence specified for a person who is convicted of a violation of this code section as set forth in paragraph 2 of this subsection, if the judge concludes that. And then there is that list, and when the judge does conclude it, he also has to write in his order what he included when reducing that sentence and getting away from the mandatory minimum.
Further question.
Yes.
My question was in relation to, is it you have to have not had any of these, or can it be any one of these?
It says that if the judge concludes that 1, and then the semicolon 2, 3, and it's between that 1 through 5. I don't know if I understand your question.
I think the way I'm reading it from line 78 all the way to 89 with the addition of and on line 83 means that it is in totality, that
Yes,
a judge
that
may
is
not
correct. Yep.
a judge may not break away if you, like a bingo chart, for example, if you've done one of these, you can't qualify for it, basically. So that's correct. If you have a felony conviction, you're not able to get any relief.
The judge may depart from the mandatory minimum sentence if those 5 things are met, and he concludes that those 5 things are met.
Thank you, Mr. Toller.
Senator from the 9th, wish to ask a question?
Senator, do you yield?
I do.
Thank you. With the same, is it true, the same penalties would apply to women and girls trafficked and forced into sexual slavery as a recruitment tactic?
As a recruitment tactic, if women
Yes, sir.
are the gang leaders that recruit women, yes.
Thank you.
You have no further questions?
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Senator from the 14th, did you wish to speak to the bill? No. We hadn't covered the bill, the amendment yet, Senator. He was going to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a really difficult subject. I'm going to ask for your grace as a body. If I make any mistakes speaking on it, I extend the same grace to my colleagues in the majority for their intentions to try to resolve a public safety issue that, you know, a lot of Georgians are really concerned about us resolving. But I want to talk today about child sex trafficking. I want to tell you a quick story about an anonymous 14-year-old victim her story starts when she was gang raped at gunpoint. She began to have legal representation with a law school clinic at the age of 15 And there are all kinds of challenges, right, associated with navigating the system when you're a victim of child sex trafficking. But a lawyer can't do everything, and she's stuck in a system where the man who's trafficking her, she refers to as her boyfriend. This is not uncommon for women victims of sex trafficking to refer to their traffickers in familial terms because those traffickers are not just abusing them. They are. They're criminally, maliciously, in an evil way abusing these women and these children, but they're also providing them food, resources, money, an alternative to a broken home and family life that leads somebody to make these unbelievable choices that in many cases really can't be characterized as choices, because even if they're volitional on the surface, and even if a young victim presents herself or himself with an air of confidence, calling somebody a boyfriend, calling themselves a member of a gang, whatever it is they might do to survive, we know that the places where these people come from when they get in these situations are so broken that we really fail to imagine what it's like. Yet here we are making the laws to govern these people. So I think it behooves us in our shortened, abbreviated process, committee meetings, floor debate, it behooves us to carry absolutely as much of this, these stories, this trauma as we can when we make these decisions. When she was 17, is my understanding, and I'm trying to keep all these details anonymous because, her lawyers can only say so much. She was a runaway. She ran away from a facility where she was staying, which, I don't know if you know this, means that she's charged with what's called a status crime. A status crime is just a crime you're guilty of by virtue of being something, not even doing something. So because she was outside the facility, she was committed to a youth detention center, which in our state's essentially a jail, pretty rough conditions. We have the same correctional officer turnover problems in those facilities that we've had in GDC. It's a sordid story. Lawyers contacted law enforcement and said, she's 17, she needs help. What can we do to help her? And they said there's nothing we can do for her because she has chosen to do this. She's of age. She's 17. We can't save her from her own choices. She got pregnant, which is hard to coordinate care from detention, you can imagine. So she goes to her first OB appointment, and at the first appointment, you have to do an exam, an intravaginal exam, which she did in handcuffs because she was a runaway, which is criminal. Now, that's just for running away. Can you imagine if she were suspected of recruiting a friend or a family member or an acquaintance into a gang? Again, handcuffs during a medical exam just for being a runaway in the state of Georgia. Who is she to us? Is she a victim or is she a criminal? Is she a victim or is she a criminal? The law enforcement apparatus that we have in this state sort of wants you to believe that there's no choice, or that there's only a choice between the two. You can't be both. We speak in these black and white terms. Y'all seen the movie Taken? I have seen the movie Taken. Liam Neeson was in that movie. People make jokes about his speeches about that movie, but the story of that movie is women who go to a fun, fancy-free vacation in Paris and they get abducted from their hotel room. There's a very dramatic sequence with a cell phone hidden under the bed and a former special service agent, forces agent giving direct instructions to his daughter. It's very dramatic. And that type of narrative, oversimplified for movies, a little bit cartoonish, fits a very 30,000 foot view of what human trafficking is all about, but it in no way comes close to the nuance of what actually happens in child sex trafficking. I have scrambled to speak with advocates about this bill because you know how these processes move. They move quickly, fix it in the House, right? We've got a train that's got to run on time, so I apologize that some of these details are forthcoming only now. But I talked to advocates this morning who told me that 50% of all child sex trafficking victims, half are estimated to have been recruited by a peer. Not by the cartoonish villain from Taken, not by a guy who just hangs around at school bus stops and waits, but 50% from people who these kids trust, that they're friends with, that have a leg and a way of getting them involved in this kind of thing. We heard testimony. I went to the Judiciary Committee hearing because I wanted to be as involved as possible in this process before making noise. And I didn't testify because I'm not trying to make too much noise too early. But the thing I wanted to, some people would disagree. We got a chairman who disagrees. But the gist of what we started to talk about at committee, I think we really need to explore now. There's testimony at the committee that there was the gang member who bragged, we've got gang members in every elementary school, middle school, high school in this county. Now, what a problem is that? It is a problem. But let's dig down to what's happening when we say that. These are not 9-year-olds who are the villains from Taken. These are kids whose family life might be in disarray, whose community life is in disarray, whose neighborhoods are falling apart, who identify as something that makes them feel stronger, makes them feel in control of their own lives, gives them a sense of social validation and purpose. Now, the wrong one, easy public policy decision that it's the wrong one, but these kids, and they are children, from these ages through 14, 15, 16, and then finally 17, which is the age of adult criminal liability in the state of Georgia, their brains aren't developed and they're looking for purpose. And in the case of sex trafficking victims, they're looking to survive. They're looking to survive. I'm going to say something awful that has been on my heart all day, and I honestly don't know what to do with it. You might be expected as a child sex trafficking victim to attend to 15 to 20 men or individual acts per day. Now, that's directly from the advocates who work with these kids every day in a clinic. If you can recruit a friend, I mean, this is awful, but it's real. If you can recruit somebody your age to take even 5 of those away per day, that is an act of survival. None of us have had to, I mean, some of us have had really hard lives, and I don't want to step on toes, but I can't imagine that many of us have had to make a decision like that once in our lives. As written, this bill does not distinguish between the story of a woman like who I just described, a child, and the cartoonish villain from Taken. They are all lumped in together. We have an amendment that would make a lot of this better, and I don't know if it's got the momentum, given that it's the governor's bill, to make it on the floor today, but I would just beseech you to think about the way that these kids are insecurely attached, the way their brains have so far to go, the fact that there are reasons way beyond bad intentions or evil or anything, you know, the easy stuff, the cartoonish stuff that plays well in elections. There are reasons why people get involved, messed up and stuff like this that go way beyond. And the last thing I'll say, I was raised in the church, and you know, one of the scriptures that always meant the most to me was, whatever you do for the least of these, you do for me. Now, I think a lot of us want that to just be, okay, whatever you contribute to charity, maybe you eat, walk, live among sinners, and that's the call. But I think it's more than that. I think that the call is to see the eyes of Jesus, the love of God, in the eyes of people who we call criminals. I think it's to find faith that transcends a 30-second political advertisement. And I think it's fitting, too, that when Pilate, you remember, said to Jesus when he was facing trial and conviction, he said, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Which basically meant, I mean, the paraphrasing is, are you leading an insurrection, right? Are you trying to overthrow the government? Is all this stuff true? His response was not to say, no, I'm not, or preach, or proselytize. His response was to say, you say that I am. Because he knew that the powers that be, the machine was going to come down on him. We are that machine. And there are sex trafficking victims who will look us in the eye and say, I'm not a victim. I am a member of a gang. They'll realize that if they get admitted to a juvenile detention facility or a GSP prison, or Department of Corrections prison, that if they identify as a victim, they are subject to more abuse, because that is how they will be classified. What they're going to do instead is say, I am a gang member. You can count on me. I'm part of the team. Because that's what keeps them safe. That's what gives them a lease on the very limited control that they've got in life. And it's for that exact reason that this chamber, if it's not careful, is going to target those exact people with 5, 10-year mandatory minimums. The reason we do mandatory minimums, if we ever do them, is because we're confident that every single member, without exception, of that class, it deserves at least that penalty. I'm telling you that the child sex trafficking victims in Georgia, the ones caught up in this mess, do not qualify for that mandatory minimum. So it's in that spirit that, as written, I currently oppose this bill. No secret, I'm probably going to oppose it, even if the amendment passes. But I'm begging you, give this amendment favorable consideration, because you're going to clean up a lot of what some of my colleagues and advocates are most concerned about on an issue that's so tough, so difficult to hold in our hearts, but I'm trying my best to do it today. I'm asking that you do as well. Thank you, Mr. President. I will yield for questions.
You do have a question, Senator. Senator from the second. You have a question for the, okay, you waive. All right, you have
Thank
no
you, Mr.
question,
President.
Senator. And we do have one amendment, and Senator from the 41st, would you like to speak to your amendment? I apologize for going out of order right there, but we do have one amendment. Senator from the 41st is authoring the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to offer this amendment in the spirit of First Lady Kemp. The senator from the 50th began by saying that cracking down on gangs is a priority of the governor. Well, protecting those who are victims of sex trafficking is a priority of First Lady Kemp. And so while I'm not the First Lady's floor leader, I am someone who happens to believe that she's right, that women and girls and children who are being trafficked need to be treated as victims and not criminals. So what this amendment does is it says that if you are under 18 and you are a victim of sex trafficking, then you cannot be prosecuted under this legislation. Now, the senator from the 50th might come here and say, well, those children are already protected because coercion is a defense. But let me be clear, our goal here is to make sure that victims of sex trafficking are not prosecuted in the first place, that they don't have to put up a defense for their victimization. That is our responsibility as this body, is to make sure that we protect children. This week and in the weeks to come, we will pass multiple bills, all in the name of protecting women, girls, and children who are victims of sex trafficking. There are multiple great bills that do that. And I am asking that you would pass this amendment in that same spirit, because we understand and recognize that these children are children and not criminals. Let us treat them as such. With that, I will yield for questions.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator from the 22nd, would you like to speak to the measure? Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I speak to the measure and also concur with everything that's been stated about the amendment. One of the things we're doing to show some of the other issues too that probably are not anticipated, but actually does happen with this particular bill. So it's not necessarily anticipated, but I think some of the things that are actually going to be taking place with the bill becomes problematic. Not only when we start talking about persons who are victims of sex trafficking, but other issues too become very problematic. So what we're doing is we're amending 1654, which talks about being in a street gang, which is very serious offense. But we may be picking up persons within this serious offense that we're not necessarily meaning to pick up. So when we amend 1654, it tells us actually to go to 1653 to tell us what we're actually going to be, our new sentencing structure is going to be. And understand that everything we're already doing is already law. The only thing we're changing is the sentencing structure. We're saying now that prosecutors and judges no longer have discretion, basically, when they're dealing with these offenses. They have to give a minimum of 5 years with two caveats that I'll talk about. But they have to give a minimum mandatory of at least 5 years. So that's where we start from. But what we have to understand is that a lot of other things are actually taken into, a lot of other events or crimes are actually brought into this. Racketeering, when we go to 1653 to understand what it covers, it says racketeering. And so initially when you think of racketeering, you're thinking of organized crime or something of that nature. And so you say, okay, I'm good with that. But then you have to recognize and actually look up racketeering. And that's where you start seeing that there may be unintended consequences here that we really could probably meter out and make changes. One, it actually includes assault. Assault cases actually now would get a mandatory 5 years. An assault in Georgia is a misdemeanor. An assault in Georgia is not even where you strike someone. It is putting someone in apprehension of fear of being struck. You didn't even hit anyone. That now, under this new sentencing structure, would be a mandatory 5 years. Also, when we start talking about violation of Controlled Substance Act, this body has been consistent saying that what we want to do as far as drug offenses, possession offenses are concerned, whether it's marijuana or other offenses, we've been consistent saying that we think that's more of a mental health issue and not necessarily one for criminal justice. Well, now, if a person who is self-medicating, not somebody who's out there selling it, it includes possession, and they may be self-medicating, something that we've all been dealing with very recently, and we've all been talking about that the key is not jail, or the key is not necessarily the criminal justice system, but mental health and social systems for that person now, automatic 5 years, if they have any drugs at all. Possession, that's the key. I would say we should filter that out and make it if you're selling, but no, we don't do that. It's possession, 5 years. Something we've been saying is not a criminal, one that the criminal justice system is best able to handle. Another one is theft. It says theft under Chapter 1. That would include just misdemeanor shoplifting. Once again, many of our courts right now, as far as misdemeanor shoplifting is concerned, they're dealing with maybe more alternative sentencing for younger people or even adults, because we say something like that, once again, the criminal justice system is not necessarily where they should go. And consistently, courts after courts in our system have been moving persons more towards alternatives when we talk about shoplifting. But theft by shoplifting, misdemeanor shoplifting, is included within that. And what we're saying now is, if you come to court under those kind of offenses, those are just a few, and of course we're talking about also the trafficking offenses that we talked about, you get 5 years. 5 years in the penitentiary. So if a person's self-medicating because they're whatever issues that they're having, things that we've recognized and said, no, the criminal justice system really isn't the best way, now that person goes to the penitentiary. Person actually goes and literally does misdemeanor shop, now that person goes to the penitentiary for 5 years. There are 2 clauses that possibly could alleviate that, but they themselves have tremendous issues. One clause says that if you basically, what I call the tell-on clause, if you were to tell on somebody, your sentence basically, after you're convicted, it can be reduced. Here's the problem with that. Initially, it sounds good, but here's the issue with it. A low-level person, the person we're talking about who may be part of this organization, but they're self-medicating and they're basically on prescription medication or any other type of narcotics, they're not selling a doggone thing, they're just part of this whole kind of situation. They're not culpable, but you know what else? They don't know anything. That person doesn't get the benefit of being able to do substantial assistance. They know nothing. And one of the things we found on the federal system, the person, though, that actually is more culpable, they know things. They actually can tell, and their sentence actually gets possibly reduced, where the person doesn't know anything, where the person who didn't even hit somebody, the person who is self-medicating, they go to jail 5 years because they don't know anything. They can't tell on anybody. Or, in the alternative, they just lie on everybody. And they don't lie on the higher-ups because they know better than that. They just lie on people like them and send them to the penitentiary. So it seems initially like, oh, this clause works, it'll help those persons that you're describing, but it won't, because they can't give substantial assistance. They have nothing to give. But here's the catch. Somebody who's more culpable, somebody who may have a firearm, somebody who may have actually caused injury, they're not excluded in this. If they give substantial assistance, their sentence can come down. So the person who's over here who says, okay, they told me I got a shoplift, and I shoplift something, literally $5 worth of something, I go to penitentiary for 5 years. I have no assistance to give. The guy over here who may have actually brandished a weapon at somebody, he tells on people, never really tells on the higher up. Somebody says it's substantial assistance, his sentence actually gets reduced. That's not what we're looking for here. I can't imagine anybody would want that. That's not what anybody is thinking would happen. But in the real world, that's exactly what's going to take place. And we're sanctioning that. We're sanctioning that. And if your concern is, well, I don't want to see persons who are not as culpable, I don't want to see them go to penitentiary. Well, that's exactly what we're doing. Because they have nothing to offer. But the guy who's actually done something, he can sit back and tell on this person, and possibly have his sentence reduced. Those who think that when you talk about mandatory minimum, that now you have uniformity, I just described to you that you don't. Different people are now treated differently. People who are more culpable get treated better than the one that is not as culpable. And we're sanctioning that. Second exception that comes up that says, well, maybe we can avoid this because if you have a second exception which says if you don't have a prior felony, you don't have a firearm, you haven't caused a death, and if the court finds it's in the interest of justice, they can deviate from the mandatory minimum. But here's the catch. Not having a prior felony, not having a firearm, not causing harm, those are objective criteria that anybody can look at. But then the court says it's in the interest of justice to deviate. That's not objective. That now becomes subjective. So if you're thinking that you now have these mandatory minimums that kind of fit one size fits all, you don't have that at all. And what do we know will take place in this kind of situation possibly? Those who can hire better lawyers, those who can hire more high-priced lawyers, they're going to be able to make that argument that it's in the best interest. Others are not going to be able to do that. They go back, they go to the penitentiary. Also, one of the things that's going to happen is the interest of justice is very subjective and very discretionary. If the prosecution is allowed to actually appeal, which they are in this particular bill, when they make their appeal, the Court of Appeals is going to uphold the judge because it's discretionary. If the Court of Appeals follows their normal way they do things, they're going to say that's very discretionary by the court, and they're going to uphold the court's ruling that substantial justice is taking place. Are we then going to come back and eliminate this portion because we're not getting the result we thought we might be able to get? These are the unintended consequences that I think persons have not really processed. That what we're going to be doing is unleashing persons who probably are more culpable, no doubt. What we're going to be doing is dragging persons in that we as a body have been saying we don't really want to do that anymore from a criminal justice standpoint, but now we bring them in, and not only just bring them in front of the court, we bring them in to penitentiary. And then last, the argument will be said, well, we'll trust our prosecutors and our judges to make the right decisions to avoid these things that I'm talking about. But the answer is we won't trust them. This bill specifically doesn't trust them. This bill specifically says we don't trust you to make the right decisions. So to say that we're going to entrust in them to make the right decision and make sure the more culpable person doesn't get away and the less culpable person doesn't get 5 years, this bill actually says that we don't trust them. And that becomes the problem of bills like this too. The final problem from a more general standpoint is we delegitimize our system. Our system is based on actually trusting the prosecutors, trusting the judges, to some extent even trusting the defense attorneys. When we do this, we delegitimize that. We say we don't trust you, we don't believe that you'll do the right thing. Only by putting this mandatory minimum in do we think justice can be served. That's not the system that we operate under. That's not the system that makes us really the great nation that we are. And the second aspect of it is it dehumanizes many of the persons that we're dealing with. Because it's only by kind of bringing all persons down and dehumanizing them can we justify taking the discretion out from our elected prosecutors and our elected judges. We have to make those persons seem like the most horrible persons on earth, because that's the only way we can justify taking away any type of discretion from our prosecutors and our judges, which is key to our system of justice. And that's why I stand opposed to this particular measure. There could be good things within here. If we're talking about a person who's trafficking in drugs, mandatory minimum may very well be the way we want to go. Certainly if we're talking about somebody who's committed aggravated assault. But when we start talking about assault, where I never even touched a person, and I'm now subject to 5 years, I think we're going places that we did not anticipate going. And with that, Mr. President, I'll yield for any questions.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you. I yield the well.
We have a second amendment, should be on your desk now. Secretary, read the caption.
Senator Mallow of the 2nd and Jones of the 10th offer the following amendments. Amendment 2, to amend Senate Committee Substitute Senate Bill 44 by changing "and" on line 83 to "or." That completes the order, Mr. President.
Senator from 2nd, you will speak to your amendment.
Thank you, colleagues. Today I rise before this great august body to address the unintended consequences that I find in this bill. One was in line 83, where when we talk about it, starting at line 75, it says, in the court's discretion, a judge may depart from the mandatory minimum sentence specified for a person who is convicted of a violation of this code section as set forth in paragraph 2 of this subsection if the judge concludes that 78, the defendant was not the leader of a criminal conduct. 79, the defendant did not possess or use a firearm, dangerous weapon, or hazardous object during the crime. The criminal conduct did not result in the death or serious bodily injury to a person other than to a person who was a party to the crime. The defendant has no prior felony conviction, and the interest of justice will not be served by the imposition of the prescribed mandatory minimum sentence. And B, if a judge departs from the mandatory minimum sentence pursuant to this paragraph, the judge shall specify on the record the circumstances for the reduction and the interest served by such departure, and such order shall be appealable by the state of Georgia pursuant to Code 5-7-1. And the reason this is important to me is because when you talk about the and or the or, you can get a felony for just about everything in the state of Georgia. And I want to talk about what it's like to grow up in a poor and impoverished community, because you can buy something off the street and you can be charged with felony theft by receiving stolen property, right? You can be charged with that. You should have known that it didn't come from a store. Well, how did I know? How did they acquire it? You should have known, because ignorance of the law is no excuse. I've heard many judges say that. And so there are unintended consequences that I could have a prior felony. What if I am a worker or an employee and I bounce a check on my personal check account? You can be charged with a felony in the state of Georgia. My check didn't hit because the company was late. The rental company doesn't care about that. They proceed through the legal process to take it to the sheriff's office, and I'm sure the gentleman could attest in this chamber that the sheriff will follow up and they will prosecute that case. You can be charged with a felony. You can plead First Offenders Act. Guess what? By this code section, if I'm guilty by association, I'm not eligible to receive any of the benefits in this code section. And so when I look at this bill, I want to talk about, what are we trying to address? Is it the leniency in sentencing? But I don't think that's a major problem here in Georgia. And increasing penalties, if that was the absolute to deterring crime, we shouldn't have any crime. But the issue, colleagues, is not about increasing the penalty. The issue is about more law enforcement officers in communities, more social services, more wraparound services, because the presence of a police officer may help to stop someone from committing a crime, but it may also help someone get help. Judges have not been on the loose in sentencing and just letting everybody go, because in my county, in the Eastern Judicial Circuit, they will sentence an individual based on the crime. And I assure you that the most violent and serious offenders in Chatham County are sentenced by the rule of law, to the letter of law, and to the fact of law, as a judge has the opportunity to sentence them. We do not let people who are violent offenders go in Chatham County. They will serve their time. But there's also the unintended people that this legislation would wrap around and bring into the Georgia Department of Corrections, because it brings into the association of what is a gang. Why would you even be a part of a gang? Well, let's talk about it. I don't know if you've ever been in poverty, impoverished, or you've had the opportunity to live in the neighborhood that I grew up in, but there's an opportunity in a gang, and that's protection. Because if there's a neighboring gang across the street, you better pick a side to be on, because depending on what side you may be on, may determine life or death for you that day. Maybe it's economics, maybe it's some cultural things, but my question is, I haven't seen the legislation for prevention. A wise man once said, an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. When I heard in the Children and Families Committee how overloaded DFACS caseworkers were, and you tell me that crime is on the rise and gangs are at a rise, I would also maybe dare to attribute it to the balance and caseload of caseworkers. That maybe if they had a smaller caseload, they could give more direct attentive attention to the children in their custody and care, because they didn't have so many children to care for. Maybe if you said that gangs were on the rise, I would also wonder about the treatment of children who would get mental health services and need additional services for mental health clinicians. But I would tell you that those who are on Medicaid in the state of Georgia, because the reimbursement rate is so low, they can't find a private provider to treat them for their mental health problems. But some things can be self-medicated. They can be self-medicated through drugs, and they can be self-medicated from the sense of wanting to belong to something, to feel important. We all are part of a group of the Georgia Senate, we all wear a nice lapel pin. We're a part of a group. We sought to come to this body. Let's be careful of how we criminalize those who seek to belong to another body because they have other cultural implications. They don't have the ability to change their neighborhood. They can't take all of the people out of their neighborhood. If they could, we'd pack them up and we'd move them. And so, as I get to the end of what I wanted to talk about in this legislation, when we talk about what you have to offer to get the reduction in the sentence, where I'm from, that's called snitching. And if you decide to tell, I want you to know that you leave family members behind. The state doesn't relocate your mother and father, your children, those you leave behind, so they become the victims of retaliatory behavior. This doesn't address what happens to those who are victims of retaliatory behavior. So if I love my loved ones and I love my family, it's best that I keep my mouth quiet and take the sentence. Because if I do that, I might keep them alive. Because if the state truly wanted to see a reduction in gang violence and gang crimes in this state, we would offer more services and victim and witness protection so that those who choose to testify to get the most dangerous people off our streets would have protection. But they don't have protection. So why should I cooperate when the lives of my loved ones will be on the line? So here I close, colleagues, just to share with you this. I didn't get to choose my neighborhood. I didn't get to choose the people in my neighborhood. I didn't sometimes get to choose the friends that I had. My grandmother wanted me to do many great things, but sometimes I was guilty by association. You know why? Because when I was a part of the group, if I was the one that didn't participate or go wherever they went, I was lame, you scary, you gotta go in the house, they make fun of you, ridicule you, and the next day I might get jumped at the bus stop. That's the reality. But I always tell people the greatest intervention was social programs like the Boy Scouts, where those leaders invested in me, gave me opportunity, saw something better in myself. Where's the legislation and the funding to help get kids services, not send them to prison? Because if you send them to prison, you further perpetuate the need that they will have to belong to a gang. Because in order to survive in prison, you got to be a part of some group. Because if you don't, those folks don't make it. And if you don't believe me, you can find all of the stories and all of the biopics of people who survive in prison, because there's a mentality in prison and a subculture in prison that if you send someone there because of their involvement in a gang, whether they were the ringleader or the lowest man on the totem pole, this legislation would make them equal. But the person at the top, as the gentleman said earlier, would get an opportunity to get off, but the gentleman at the very lowest common denominator that may just be guilty by association has no opportunity to find any reduction in sentence and will go to prison. And so I'd hate to find an opportunity where a kid like myself, who just happened to be there, not knowing what was happening, had not been a part of any criminal enterprise or a part of any crime, but by the virtue of the statute in the state of Georgia where two people are gathered, you can be a part of a gang. And if I had no prior knowledge, what good is it to prove it in court if the other two could testify to get their time cut to say that I was the ringleader, that I did it? Because by virtue of this legislation, that's, my friends, what we're enabling to happen. Those who are at the top of the pyramid can get their time cut by telling on someone at the bottom of the pyramid that may not have anything to do with it. And so those who deserve a second chance or another opportunity won't get it, and the people who are actually the violent, most criminal offenders with the most information to share will receive a reduction in their sentence because it's prudent for justice. So, colleagues, I ask that you consider all of the amendments that are before you today, and I ask that we look at how we really make a change in gangs in the state of Georgia, and how we look at gangs, and how we look at the issues that are perplexing us, because you cannot arrest your way out of this. We didn't get here by arresting our way out of it, and some would argue that we did, but I encourage you that this will come from the investment in communities, reducing the caseloads of social workers, getting kids their medication and getting them treatment so that they can receive all of the luxuries, because guess what? If you're in poverty, if you're in the hood, no matter where you are, you probably can't change your circumstance. You can't just pack up and move. Like some folks, if they don't like the schools, you can pack up and move. But some people are a product of their condition, and if we want to change the products, then we have to change their conditions. And changing their conditions does not send them to prison. It provides them with social workers, clinicians, more police officers, because if you wanted to tell something and you wanted to report something in your community, who would you call? As a parent, how would you find help? Who would you call to say that your child was engaging in this type of behavior? Who would you get to help you work with a troubled child, because as we've heard in our Committee on Children and Families, nobody likes to work with troubled children. And so, colleagues, the children that will be affected by this legislation are those troubled children who don't have anybody else to speak for them. And with that, Mr. President, I hope that I've spoken for those children today. And with that, I will yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. You have no questions. Senator from the 50th, would you like to close debate?
Thank you, Mr. President. Sitting here today, I am a little disheartened with some of the things that were said about this bill. I don't recognize the bill because of how it was portrayed. I understand politics, but here's the policy. There's no room for gangs in Georgia, and you don't need to come after our children. That's what the governor's made very clear on his campaign and what he has done under this Gold Dome under his administration. Sex trafficking victims are not prosecuted the way that it was portrayed in this chamber today. This bill is not opening up any new penalties in the code. It is heightening penalties for gang members and those who recruit children. And our governor and our First Lady 2 years ago passed the Survivors First Act, the vacature statute, where if you can show that you were prosecuted while being a victim of sex trafficking, your sentence was vacated. So I oppose both amendments. Right now, the mandatory minimums do not apply to children. If you are a child recruiting another child, you'll go through the juvenile system and will be vacated that way. These mandatory minimums do not apply unless a 7 deadly is associated with them. And with that, Mr. President, I ask for favorable consideration of this legislation and oppose all amendments. Thank you.
Senator has yielded well. The senator still wishes to speak to the measure. You waive. Senator, waive. All right, he's closed debate. We now have, we'll take up Amendment 1. Is there objection to Amendment 1? Objection to Amendment 1. All those in favor of the amendment will signify by yeas and nays here. Show of hands in favor of Amendment 1. Show of hands. Roll call. We've requested roll call. We have 5 members. All right. We've requested roll call. Secretary will unlock the machine for Amendment 1. This is on the measure of Amendment 1. Senator from the 41st, what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that a green vote is a yes in favor of protecting children who are victims of sex trafficking?
Senator is passionate about what she speaks. Senator from the 14th, for what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that all 17-year-old defendants start in Superior Court for adults, and 15 and 16-year-olds can get transferred based from the juvenile court depending on how serious the crime is, and this bill makes the crime more serious?
It is true. Every senator has a red and green button.
Thank you.
On the passage of the amendment, the yeas are 25, the nays are 28, and the amendment has failed. Taking up Amendment 2. Amendment 2 here. Any objection to Amendment 2? Objections from the 50th. All those in favor of the amendment signify by show of hands. Yay. All those in favor of the amendment, yay. Roll call. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from the second, for what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, is it not true that by voting for this amendment from and to or, you allow Superior Court judges the jurisprudence to make decisions based off of any of that combination and not it in its entirety?
Senator is passionate about his amendment. On the passage of the amendment, the yeas are 23 and the nays are 30, and the amendment has failed. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. There. On the adoption of the committee substitute, is there objection to agreeing to the report on committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The reporting of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 31, the nays are 22. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority and is therefore passed by substitute. Moving on to SB 21, Secretary read the caption.
Senate Bill 21 by Senator Kirkpatrick of the 32nd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 38-414 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to creation of Georgia Veteran Service Foundation Incorporated, purpose, operation, and reporting, so as to revise operations to provide for related matters. The Senate Committee on Veterans, Military Affairs, and Homeland Security recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Dugan of the 30th, Chairman. Veterans, Military, and Homeland Security offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 21, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 38-414 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to creation of Georgia Veteran Service Foundation Incorporated, purpose, operation, and reporting, so as to revise operations. That completes the order, Mr. President.
I recognize the senator from the 32nd to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 21 has to do with the Georgia Department of Veteran Services. The Department of Veteran Services has a Veteran Service Board that makes recommendations to the department and the governor's office, and it's composed of all veterans. There's another board that this bill addresses that's a Veteran Service Foundation Board, and it's a separate entity, and the purpose of the Foundation Board is to raise money for veterans' causes. For example, we're in need of increasing our nursing homes, our state nursing homes in Georgia. That's just one example. So this bill changes the composition of the Foundation Board to allow a limited number of non-veterans to serve. It shortens the terms from 7 years to 3 years, and it changes the meeting schedule from annually to quarterly, and this is all for the purpose of increasing the ability of the foundation to raise money for veterans' causes. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you. I yield well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question? Is it a question? is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report on committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machines. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 52 and the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. All right, last bill of the day is Senate Bill 60. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 60 by Senator Hatchett of the 50th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 14 of Chapter 1 of Title 10 of the OCGA relating to secondary metal recyclers so as to provide that it shall be illegal for certain persons to purchase, possess, obtain, or sell, or attempt to purchase, possess, obtain, or sell used detached catalytic converters, used utility wire, or used communications wire, copper. The Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Strickland of the 17th Chairman. Mr. President, that
I recognize the senator. Oh, we got a substitute. Hold on.
Senate
Hold
Judiciary offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 60, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 14 of Chapter 1 of Title 10 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to secondary metals recyclers so as to provide that it shall be illegal for certain persons to purchase, possess, obtain, or sell, or attempt to purchase, possess, obtain, or sell used detached catalytic converters, used utility wire, or used communications copper, to provide for definitions to regulate and limit the payment allowed by secondary metals recyclers to require certain registrations. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Recognize Senator from the 50th. Speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. This one is a much easier bill than the one I had previously. This is, you might recognize it, it is recycled. We had it last year. It deals with secondary metal recyclers. What this bill does is it gives law enforcement the tools they need to help crack down on a big problem across the state, which is catalytic converter theft. My good friend from the senator from the 10th had a piece of legislation that was very similar to this. We've kind of joined forces, got together, have put together a really good piece of legislation that is the result of a collaboration and negotiation with everybody in the metal theft that has a stakeholdership in metal theft. So I ask for your favorable consideration of this bill. This bill also has a 2-year pilot program that we're trying to do with the secondary metal recyclers that would allow them to pay less than $100 for scrap metal. That does not include catalytic converters, copper wire, or air conditioning coils, things that are commonly stolen. We do think this is an unnecessary burden right now on secondary metal recyclers, and hopefully this will help. But I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. President.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you. I yield the
I
word.
recognize the senator from the 10th like to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of this great body, I'll be brief. I just stand in support of Senate Bill 60, and I want to thank the senator from the 50th for working with all of us, particularly those on the other side of the aisle, and putting together what I hope would be a much better bill than we had last year. There's no questions. I yield the well.
You have no questions, Senator. Does any senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hearing none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 50 and the nays are 2. Looks like we got an alliance forming back there between the senators from the 27th and the 50th here, 51st, I guess. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. I recognize the majority leader for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Tuesday, February 14th, which is Valentine's Day.
Oh, that is sweet. Secretary, read the announcements.
The Rules Committee meeting will happen upon adjournment in 450 of the Capitol. The Government Oversight Committee meeting is canceled. The Health and Human Services Committee meeting is canceled. The Economic Development and Tourism Committee meeting will happen at 3:30 p.m. in 450 of the Capitol. The State and Local Governments Operations Committee meeting will happen at 4 p.m. in Mezzanine 1 of the Capitol. The Finance Committee meeting is canceled. The Judiciary Committee meeting will happen at 4 p.m. in 307 CLOB, and the Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee meeting will happen at 5 p.m. in 450 of the Capitol. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Completes the order. Are there any additional announcements? Somebody please ask the senator from the 29th where he got his jacket from. I might need a Valentine's gift there. So, the majority leader has moved that the Senate stand adjourned until Tuesday, February 14th at 10 a.m. 2023. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes clearly have it. We are adjourned.